This is Goldin Finance 117. A Hong Kong billionaire spent $3 billion trying to make it the fifth tallest building on Earth, crowned with a diamond-shaped peak. Most Americans have never heard the name. 128 floors. Construction stopped in December 2015. 10 years standing completely empty. How does a tower built to withstand typhoons and earthquakes end up with a structural ratio engineers still argue over? What is it about a stock market crash that costs a billionaire more money than the tower itself was worth? Why did daredevils turn an abandoned supertall into one of the most dangerous attractions in China? Then after 10 years where nobody would touch it, why did an entire country suddenly decide to save it? And who's stuck holding the bill for one man's failed trophy tower? To understand any of that, rewind first to when this tower still looked like the future. Construction began in 2008. The design called for a 1,959-foot supertall in Tianjin's Qiqing district, roughly 90 miles southeast of Beijing, its glass exterior sloping upward to a diamond-shaped crown at the very top. Stack a 40-story building on top of the Empire State Building, and that's roughly the height. Behind it stood Pan Sutong, a Hong Kong native who had spent the previous 2 decades turning a mid-sized real estate firm into a southern China powerhouse. By his early 50s, Forbes put his net worth above $25 billion. Racing teams, vineyards in Bordeaux. The kind of collection that comes standard at that level of wealth. What he didn't have yet was a monument, something visible from every direction. So he commissioned the tower from the international architecture firm P&T Group, with 117 of its floors set aside for a 5-star hotel, corporate offices, and the city's most expensive condominiums, a number picked deliberately because it's considered lucky for wealth in Chinese culture. The remaining 11 floors sat above that: mechanical space, an observation deck, and crown levels nobody had asked for, but everybody would end up staring at. He didn't look for partners. Pan covered construction out of his own pocket and borrowed the rest against stock in his own company, staking his entire fortune on one building. Tianjin city government had its own version of the same ambition, racing to turn a port town into a financial hub that could stand next to Shanghai and Hong Kong, with Pan's tower positioned as the centerpiece of that pitch. By 2015, 7 years in, the tower topped out as the 5th tallest building on Earth. The glass exterior was mostly finished. The diamond crown stood framed in steel. Interior work was already underway, and a grand opening looked to be less than a year off. That was the plan. Here's what actually happened. The structural system is a steel and concrete megaframe. 4 massive composite columns anchored at the tower's 4 corners, carrying the entire vertical load, tied together with steel bracing trusses every few floors. The same load-bearing logic as a football stadium's roof trusses, scaled up 40 stories. Near the top, a tuned mass damper. A massive weight built to swing opposite the building's natural sway keeps the whole structure stable in high winds, the same technology used in Taipei 101 and the John Hancock Tower in Boston. The design has to survive typhoons that hit the Chinese coast every year and earthquakes from the North China Plain, one of the most seismically complex regions on the planet. The diamond crown alone rose roughly 260 feet, built to glow across the entire skyline at night, and double as the tower's observation deck, an unmistakable silhouette meant to announce the building from every direction. Height alone isn't what should worry anyone here. The tower's height-to-width ratio runs close to 9.5 to 1 past the limit set by China's own seismic code for buildings this tall. Picture an average adult about 4 times as tall as their shoulders are wide. Now stretch that same proportion to nearly 10 to 1, and that's how thin this tower was for how tall it stood. The higher that ratio climbs, the more a building sways and strains under wind and earthquake load, and 9.5 to 1 leaves almost no cushion for error. It's the kind of number a structural engineer flags on paper years before anyone talks about money. a decision made in a boardroom long before a single crane showed up on site. Nobody who signed off on it ever had to explain that number in public. Then the budget numbers came in.
Fear and panic have taken hold. Investors watched the markets melt down across the globe last night, and they're reacting to it. The focal point, of course, the one that everyone's talking about, is China.
In June 2015, China's stock market went into free fall, wiping out roughly a third of the Shanghai Exchange's value in under a month. The government tried trading suspensions and emergency intervention, and the slide kept going anyway. Pan Sutong's flagship company, listed on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, took one of the worst hits on the board. In a single day of trading, the company's market value dropped by tens of billions of dollars within hours. Forbes reported that Pan's fortune collapsed from more than $25 billion down to a small remainder of that figure. Other outlets estimated the loss at roughly $13 billion within the first few weeks. Repeated margin calls and a string of forced asset sales then continued to erode what remained of his net worth over the following 2 years. This was the 2008 decision finally catching up with him. He'd built the tower on borrowed money backed by shares in his own company. Those shares had just become worthless. By December 2015, 6 months after the crash began, Pan's company was no longer able to repay the loans taken out to build the tower. Everything came to a stop. Contractors stopped showing up. Workers who had spent 7 years pouring concrete and welding steel left their tools exactly where they stood and walked away without their final paychecks. The cranes locked in place on the roof, frozen mid-lift. Then it gets worse. From the outside, the tower looked almost finished, a glass giant visible from nearly every part of the metropolitan area. From the inside, it was bare concrete floors, exposed mechanical risers, and empty elevator shafts. A skeleton dressed in glass with over 4 million square feet of usable space and not one paying tenant inside it. Climbers from Russia and China scaled the unfinished diamond crown without harnesses and posted the footage online, drawing millions of views on social media. Base jumpers parachuted off the upper floors for years afterward, and the tower earned a reputation in urban exploration circles as one of the ultimate trespassing prizes on Earth. In 2019, Guinness World Records certified Goldin Finance 117 as the tallest empty building on Earth. Tianjin officials kept publicly promising a revival. Investors circled. Engineers came to study the structure. None of it went anywhere. A few miles away, the same city finished a different supertall without any trouble at all. The Tianjin CTF Finance Center proof this was never a problem with Tianjin's ability to build. The problem was specific to how Goldin Finance 117 got financed. Enough towers ran into that same wall that China's government eventually banned any new building over 1,640 feet nationwide. By 2023, the fallout from a 2021 default by Evergrande, once China's largest property developer, had dragged much of the country's real estate sector into crisis. This one empty tower no longer looked like an isolated accident. It started to look like early proof of something much bigger. Pan Sutong's other holdings were seized. His company was delisted from the Hong Kong Stock Exchange in 2020, and in January 2025, a Tianjin court accepted a bankruptcy liquidation filing against it, appointing a team to take the tower off his hands for good. 10 years after the cranes stopped, nobody had torn it down and nobody had finished it either. And here's the part nobody wanted to answer. In April 2025, state-backed investors moved in. China Cinder Asset Management, a state-owned firm that buys up distressed Chinese debt, organized a bailout fund worth roughly 30 billion yuan, more than $4 billion, to restart a project its original owner could no longer afford. A new construction permit was issued that same month. By November 2025, the tower itself was auctioned off through a state trading platform at a reserve price near 8.7 billion yuan, more than $1 billion, just to settle what Pan Sutong left behind. Workers hoisted the first section of the Diamond Crown's steel frame on March 28, 2026. drone footage showing welders and concrete crews on a site that had sat frozen for 11 years, with completion now targeted for 2027. 19 years after the ground was first broken and 12 years after the diamond was supposed to be finished.
It is just enormous, made to seem even bigger by the fact that there's basically nothing around except for this ugly thing. Although maybe this bizarrely tragic ghost scrapery tale ends with a happy ending, as they are actually now doing some work.
Nobody who approved the original design paid a personal price for it. Pan Sutong lost his fortune first. Now it's a state-run fund covering what's left of the bill, and he won't own a single floor of the building he started. Money could finish the building. It couldn't answer the question that mattered more. Qiaotong law professor at Duke University said, "I seriously don't know who is going to buy or rent this commercial space." By early April 2026, leasing for the tower was mostly done. 17 companies signed on, split roughly evenly between state-owned firms and private ones, for space that won't exist until the building itself does. The tower is still holding its Guinness World Record for standing vacant, and most of its 117 leasable floors out of 128 total still need tenants before construction wraps in 2027. If the target holds, this would be one of the few buildings to hold a record for standing empty, then quietly lose it. And all of it traces back to one decision. One trading day buried a $3 billion tower for 10 years. And it's not the only tower where this is happening. The same story already played out in downtown Los Angeles. Oceanwide Plaza, a billion-dollar luxury complex from a Beijing-based developer, stalled in 2019 when the money ran out, and its empty towers became a canvas for graffiti artists and a target for base jumpers. The same reputation Goldin Finance 117 earned on the other side of the world. Los Angeles found a private buyer instead of a state bailout. This wasn't one billionaire's bad bet. It was a system that let a 1,959-foot tower rise on borrowed confidence for 7 straight years on a ratio nobody outside a boardroom ever heard about. And that only stepped in to fix it once an empty skyline became more embarrassing than an expensive one. Nobody who made that decision is being asked to justify it. Is using state funds to rebuild a monument to a billionaire a wise move in an unstable market, or a guaranteed bailout for the next developer, reckless enough to build too big? Make your case below. You just don't know which tower gets the rescue next. The project you just watched took years to fail publicly. The next one on this channel took longer and cost more. Subscribe, because by the time it makes the news, it's already too late. Comments are open. Name your city.